It began as an ordinary February night in Houston, Texas. A young woman, just 22 years old, full of dreams and ambition, stepped out with friends. Her name was Catalina Gutierrez, vibrant, loved, and destined for a bright future. But within hours, that future was stolen. Her sudden disappearance left a family desperate for answers, a city on edge, and investigators racing against time. When the truth finally surfaced, it exposed a chilling story of betrayal, brutality, and a man who believed he could erase her existence. This is the haunting case of Catalina Gutierrez, a story of promise cut short, of justice pursued, and of the devastating reminder that even the most ordinary nights can turn into tragedy. Catalina Gutierrez was born into a family that adored her, surrounded by love and nurtured with the kind of warmth that shapes a vibrant personality. She grew up in Houston, Texas, a city rich with diversity, where she quickly made her mark as someone unforgettable. Friends described her as radiant, compassionate, and endlessly supportive. She had a way of lighting up a room with her smile, of making people feel seen and valued. By her teenage years, Catalina had already shown herself to be ambitious and hardworking. She loved fashion, music, and travel, and dreamed of building a life filled with independence and purpose. She wasn't just admired for her beauty, but for her determination and drive. Her family often shared how protective she was of her younger siblings, and how deeply she cared about others. Catalina's future seemed bright and limitless, a path filled with potential, but that promise would soon be cut short in the most brutal way imaginable. On the night of February 6, 2022, Catalina's plans seemed ordinary. She spent the evening with friends, enjoying laughter, music, and the comfort of being surrounded by people she trusted. To those who saw her, nothing appeared out of place. She was relaxed, happy, and looking forward to the next chapter in her life, unaware that danger was waiting just around the corner. Later that night, Catalina left to head home, driving her black Dodge Charger. It was a routine moment, a young woman simply ending her night and returning home safely. But along the route, something went terribly wrong, and the normalcy of that evening dissolved into a chilling mystery. By the following morning, Catalina's family grew worried when they couldn't reach her. She hadn't come home, and her phone went silent. Calls rang unanswered. For someone who always checked in and stayed connected, this silence was alarming. Within hours, the unease turned into fear, and the search for Catalina began, igniting what would soon become a desperate citywide effort. Catalina's family wasted no time. They reported her missing, urging authorities to act quickly. Flyers were printed, social media posts were shared, and friends organized search groups that stretched across neighborhoods. The Houston Police Department opened an official investigation, combing through phone records, surveillance cameras, and credit card activity to reconstruct her final movements. One of the first significant discoveries was her car. Catalina's Dodge Charger was found abandoned in southwest Houston. Inside were personal items she would never have left behind, including belongings that proved she hadn't simply run away. For investigators, this immediately raised red flags. It wasn't a case of someone voluntarily leaving their life behind. Catalina had been taken, and the clock was now ticking. The discovery of her vehicle intensified the urgency. For her family, hope remained that she was alive, but dread hung heavily in the air. They feared the worst, but clung to the belief that answers would come. Each hour that passed without news weighed on them, turning grief into determination as they pushed harder for the truth. Just a few days later, the nightmare deepened. On February 11th, authorities discovered human remains in a remote area of Montgomery County, Texas. The location was wooded, secluded, and far from Catalina's last known whereabouts. Investigators quickly suspected the remains belonged to her, but the family had to endure the agonizing wait for confirmation. When the identification came back, it shattered everything. The remains were confirmed as Catalina Gutierrez. She was just 22 years old. The discovery devastated her loved ones. Vigils were held, candles lit, and flowers left in her honor. Friends and family spoke about her kindness, her dreams, and the senselessness of her loss. The community, gripped by grief, demanded justice for the young woman whose life had been violently stolen. With Catalina's body discovered, detectives shifted their focus toward finding her killer. Clues from her car, phone records, and surveillance footage began to narrow the possibilities. Investigators suspected someone close to her may have been involved. Digital evidence showed connections between Catalina and a man named Andrew Williams, a 26-year-old Houston resident. Witnesses reported seeing Catalina with him before her disappearance. Andrew was known to authorities, carrying a history of violent behavior and troubling past incidents that raised suspicion. As detectives dug deeper, more evidence linked him to the crime. Forensic analysis revealed DNA that matched. Surveillance footage placed him near the area where her car was abandoned. His movements in the days after her disappearance were erratic, and his behavior suspicious. The picture that formed was chilling. Andrew Williams was not just a suspect, he was the primary suspect. On February 17, 2022, police arrested Andrew Williams in connection with Catalina's murder. The charges included capital murder, abduction, and tampering with evidence. His arrest made headlines across Houston, shocking the community that had been following the case closely. The evidence against him was damning. DNA analysis tied him directly to Catalina. Cell phone tower data placed him near her at the time of her disappearance, and later in the remote area where her body was found. Forensic teams uncovered additional proof, including items linking Catalina to locations Williams had visited after the crime. During questioning, Andrew offered little cooperation. His accounts shifted, and inconsistencies plagued his statements. Detectives saw a man desperately trying to distance himself from the crime, but failing under the weight of overwhelming evidence. For Catalina's family, the arrest brought some measure of relief. The man suspected of destroying their daughter's life was finally in custody, but relief was shadowed by grief. Nothing would ever bring Catalina back. The trial process for Andrew Williams began months later, drawing massive media attention. Prosecutors laid out the case in detail. Catalina had been targeted, abducted, and brutally killed. The motive, while never fully clarified, was tied to control and violence. Prosecutors emphasized the brutality of the crime and the trail of evidence left behind. They highlighted Catalina's stolen future, the impact on her loved ones, and the need for justice. The defense, by contrast, attempted to sow doubt, arguing technicalities and questioning evidence, but the facts spoke loudly. Witnesses were called, including forensic experts, law enforcement officers, and friends of Catalina. Their testimony painted a devastating picture of the last hours of her life and the horror of what followed. In the end, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty of capital murder. Andrew Williams was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Catalina's family, justice had been served, though the loss remained unbearable. The murder of Catalina Gutierrez left scars that will never fade. Her family has spoken openly about their grief, describing the void left by her absence. Her siblings lost not only a sister, but also a guiding light, someone who had always been there for them. Her case also sparked conversations across Houston about violence, safety, and the hidden dangers young women face. Community groups organized in her memory, calling for more protections and awareness. Vigils and memorials continued long after the trial, each gathering a reminder of the love people carried for Catalina. Her name has become a symbol of resilience and a call for change. She was more than a victim. She was a daughter, sister, and friend, whose life, though tragically short, continues to inspire people to stand against violence and seek justice. The case of Catalina Gutierrez is a haunting reminder of how quickly a promising life can be stolen by violence. She was only 22, with dreams, ambitions, and a future ahead of her. But her story was cut short in a way that left her family, friends, and community shattered. Yet even in tragedy, her legacy lives on. Catalina's name is spoken with love, and her memory fuels the demand for accountability and justice. Her case shows us the importance of protecting the vulnerable and never turning away from the warning signs of violence. If you found this story important, help keep Catalina's memory alive. Like this video, share it with others, and subscribe for more deep dive true crime stories that go beyond the headlines. Every share, every comment keeps her voice, and the voices of others like her, from ever being forgotten.